So I want to take the opportunity to move on to the next session, which we will have a presentation or by Mr. Wamkele Mene, who is the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. He is no stranger to all of us. We have been following the Cfta and the role of young people in contributing to the Cfta. Mr. Wamkele has previously worked at the World Trade Organization. He was also the Chief Director in the South African Department of Trade and Industry. He's a graduate of London School of Economics and has done a great job in putting together the Cfta that we've been looking to participate in as young people. This session is moderated by Mr. Mishek Mtize, who deals with credit rating agencies in the African peer review mechanism. So I want to take this opportunity to hand over to Mr. Mishek, who moderates this session, to bring Mr. Wamkele on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chief Moderator. Perhaps let me also join others in congratulating and recognizing all the distinguished speakers and panel members who has been raising very intriguing and provocative points. I think I'm very optimistic that most of the views they raise really resonates with a lot of youth who are participating in this platform today. So, I think our main speaker has been, his biography has been introduced by the chief moderator. Thank you very much for that. He is indeed sitting at the helm of a very important initiative, which has been one of the key continental initiatives in terms of being the largest global free trade area, in terms of the number of countries that are participating. And I'm sure there is so much expectation around the African continental free trade area that it is set to transform the continent's economic prospect. So I have the privilege to invite to the platform our main speaker, who is the man of the moment, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, who is the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the platform over to you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Mene has technical issues, so maybe you can proceed, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll give him the opportunity to make his presentation when he's able to join us. So I think we have to proceed to the panel of respondents. Who, we have a very diverse panel, which was meant to discuss this initiative on the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is a very innovative initiative and potentially promising to be a game changer on the continent, especially in the area of intercontinental trade and also employment creation. But we must say that its success and continuity lies in the contribution of the youth, especially in building its legacy. So in this session, we explore a number of areas, but key to this is whether the African youth are well equipped with skills and expertise to participate meaningfully in the and effectively in the AfCFTA, in the African Continental Free Trade Area, and whether the African women who are players in cross-border trading are being sufficiently cited in as best practice for the African trade, and what lessons can we take from the African women in making the Cfta a success. So we'll go further also to discuss the key challenges faced by young women in contributing to Africa's development? And how can the CFTA respond to some of the needs of women in trade? And how can the CFTA also unlock the entrepreneurial opportunities that prioritize the needs of youth on the continent? So to join me in this discussion, I've got a very rich panel of distinguished respondents. I will start by calling to the platform Mr. Palmer Mtandwa, who is an entrepreneur with keen interest in design and fabrics, and also in business development. He is also the founder of and CEO of Barton Brothers, which is a company in fashion and designing. So, Mr. Palmer, I invite you to the platform. The platform is all yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mishek. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this esteemed platform. I also want to thank all the guys at APRM for inviting me to speak on this symposium. The topic we're speaking about today is youth participation and contribution towards building a strong free trade Africa agreement. The first thing I'd like to look at before we speak about this is sort of just rewind a little bit and look at production and look at value addition to African resources and products. I run a business called Capra Fabrics. I've got a few businesses in the textiles and fashion space, but one of my most important ones is called Capra Fabrics. And what we do is we distribute luxury fabrics from Europe and Asia into Africa to different designers and tailors across the continent. It's a very interesting business, and what I'd like to look at in that particular business is, and especially with a free trade agreement, would allow the opportunity to move products back and forth with ease in the African continent. But whose products are we moving is the question, and what value does that bring to us as an African continent? Currently we move Asian products, we move Italian products and English products, and yes, it gives designers in Africa an opportunity to get access to these beautiful products. But the real person who's winning in the situation is the Asians and the Europeans. Us as Africans have to be able to produce our own products and be able to distribute our own products. I'd like to speak about a particular product which is very interesting. It's a fiber which comes from the Eastern Cape. It's called mohair. So mohair comes from an Angora goat, and basically what they do is they shear the goats, take the fiber, and the fiber is used to make a fabric which would be used in suiting. But as Africa or South Africa, we produce 80% of that particular fiber. And that fiber is sent over to the UK and to Japan and to England. And then we buy back the fabric to make clothes. This to me doesn't make sense. As a continent, and why we do this is the same thing with cotton. Zimbabwe produces some of the world's most luxurious cotton fiber. And that fiber is bought up by the Japanese. They use it for their luxury denim, and also by the English people and the Italians, and they use it to make luxury shirting. So brands which you might know like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, they actually have a Zimbabwean fiber within their products. But we only get a minimal benefit from that opportunity, from that transaction. And I don't see why we should be doing that. I think as Africans, we need to start moving away from that ideology of just selling products in their raw state. You see this in other industries like mining, gold, diamonds. They get sent as a raw material overseas. They get manufactured and sent back to us. So the first question and the point that I'd like to raise is, as Africans and as African leaders especially, they need to understand this and help us. We need to add value to our products. And by adding value, we create value in jobs, which we're desperately in need for at the moment, and also an opportunity to control the market. The market gets controlled by the people who are buying the product, which doesn't make sense at all. We should be the ones who are controlling that particular market. So before we look at a free trade agreement and the benefits that the free trade agreement is going to lend us, we need to understand who benefits from that free trade agreement. We need to look at that value chain and how we can add value to our own products. Another business that I run is Button Brothers Tailoring. It's a luxury fashion house. And what we do is we create products which basically give liberty and they help us. Well, basically what I'm trying to say is this particular product is an African product, but we sell this product overseas, and it's inspired mainly by Africa and by African leaders. Our most successful product is a safari suit, and the safari suit is inspired by the Front State leaders like Robert Mugabe, Samuel Michel, and we get a lot of uptake and buying of this product in other parts of Africa like Nigeria and Ghana, but also overseas. People in the UK, Africans in the UK are buying a lot of this product. Africans in America are buying this product, and a free trade agreement will definitely allow us an opportunity to be able to sell this product quite easily across the continent, which is a good thing for us as youth and as an entrepreneur. I think that will provide a great opportunity. But the most important thing out of this is, and especially when I created the product, I made sure that this product had to be made by Africans. If I'm going to sell this narrative of African liberty, the product that I'm making has to be made in Africa, not in China. And that was very important for me to do. So basically, going back to the question and touching back on it, let's look at the value. Where is the value of a free trade agreement and who's benefiting from it? That's for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer, for your presentation. I think you make some very important point there, which is key to the discussion that is going on the success of the CFTA, which is the issue of value addition and the rules of origin, which has been critical to the success of this initiative, because our industries, as you know, they describe them as suboptimal in the sense that they are not very well advanced in terms of having the technology to add value. So at this opportunity, I will invite our next respondent, who is Ms. Cindy Mapungulo. She is the Managing Director of the Business Development Agency, an advisory and consultancy company. So Ms. Peel, Mr. Cindy Peel, we are very happy to have you. Thank you very much. Your platform, the platform is all yours, ma'am.
So thank you so much. Just to confirm, can you hear my audio? Am I audible?
Very well, loud and clear.
All right, fantastic. So thank you so much, first of all, for, granting me the opportunity to share my voice. There has been quite a few contributions throughout the day as I was listening in, and other such events, of course, on the need for increased focus on implementation, which I obviously completely agree. I won't speak much about high-level stuff, particularly also, or maybe partly because a major part of my daily work through the BDA is on the ground with the SMEs, and particularly those that are led by young people. In addition to this, a point about capacity building was actually brought up by Ms. Etia, if my memory serves me correctly. And what that really sparked, in my mind at least, is how youth, SME, and innovation in our space has somewhat, almost become synonymous. And indeed, there's plenty of challenges there, but one that perhaps was made even more apparent is the major gap in forging strategic partnerships with various stakeholders to support young entrepreneurs. So let's take the loan, that loan guarantee scheme program that was launched here in South Africa. I make this example, only because it was also made, public, and the entities that were instrumental in putting that together, were quite vocal on the disappointing turnout. So by mid-January this year, out of the 200 billion that was actually made available, under 18 billion was actually approved. This made, some of us in the space, wonder if those, I suppose, such as the BDA that work on the ground were consulted in designing this solution. And I say solution, also because we all know that even before lockdown, SMEs were already struggling with a myriad of issues. One that really sticks out is access to markets. Never mind compliance and access, compliance to access markets, but I believe it's a no-brainer as well at this point that no entrepreneur would increase debt, not knowing, when they would be able to pay it back. So earlier in the video that was played here during the brief break, there was a quote that was made by former President Thabo Mbeki, which pretty much summarizes my thinking or my contributions here today. He said, "There's a need for partnerships amongst ourselves as Africans, not just organization to organization, but people to people as well." And my opinion, this will go a long way in realizing, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So the questions that I have, or the big question that needs to be answered by organizations that, I come from or that I represent as well, is how do we make it easier for young people or youth across the continent to collaborate? How do we produce youth that both understand what the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is, and then how then ultimately do they access markets? In our engagements with a lot of these young entrepreneurs, by the way, that we have, that we assist through various, coaching programs. A lot of them don't even understand, what the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and more especially those that are in communities like your townships, as well as your, your rural areas where, of course, unemployment is at a rife. And so then the question that I have, or the question that, that we are trying to solve on a day-to-day basis is answering, how do we get the information, how do we educate, and how do we prepare, these young people on the ground? Because of course we can, speak about the bigger picture, but our job is to talk about the questions that are on the ground that entrepreneurs or these young people really, are also looking at. So I think my contributions basically are summarized in that quote that I, brought forth, that was mentioned by the former president. How do we, as Africans, work better together, but also forge strategic partnerships, whether organization to organization, but also individuals to individuals, in making sure that young people on this continent are not left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peel, for your response. It's very important. I think that's also answers to some of the questions that we are raising in this session, that are SMEs ready to benefit from the CFTA, the benefits that are going to be made available by the CFTA. So indeed, the issue of partnerships, strategic partnerships, and synergy will really create the base and the capacity for them to tap effectively into the best that is going to be created by the CFTA. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Prudence Sebahizi, who is going to represent the Secretary General of ACFTA, because unfortunately is no longer able to join us. So Mr. Prudence will speak on his behalf. So Mr. Prudence, the platform is all yours, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Mishek. And let me start by greeting everyone who is here, and also convey the greetings of His Excellency Wamkele Mene. He was here a while ago. Unfortunately, due to other engagements, he had to leave before his time to speak comes. He asked me to sincerely thank the African peer review mechanism for inviting him, of course, in a collaboration with the University of Cape Town and the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance for hosting this Africa Day Public Symposium, and asking him to be a speaker at this very important event. Of course, he thought this panel is very important as we speak on youth participation and contribution towards building a strong African Continental Free Trade Area. And this topic is very important to him because he's already spearheading the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation on the continent. And he asked me to, of course, to articulate some of the opportunities which the AfCFTA brings to the young people on the continent, so that they can participate actively in its implementation. We know that the agreement that establishes the AfCFTA is not just a trade agreement, it's a developmental instrument, and it is transformational, it is inclusive, and with it, we aim to harness the best of the innovations of Africa for the benefits of Africa. It ushers in an era of predictability in the African business environment. As a trade instrument, we are focusing currently on ensuring the harmonization of our trade instrument and processes, including customs, transit, trade facilitation, and border clearances. We also plan to harmonize standards and technical regulations in the continent in order to ensure that these do not become barriers to legitimate trade. We have developed a mechanism to eliminate non-tariff barriers, and this mechanism or this tool is available to the business community, and it can be accessed online. We are also planning to develop the regional value chains as the precursor to continental and global value chains. Of course, the AfCFTA will contribute greatly to accelerating trade, investment, job and wealth creation in Africa. And by harnessing the power of AfCFTA, technology, talents, and collaboration, we can leapfrog business growth, job and wealth creation in Africa. This is indeed good news for young people of Africa, because AfCFTA is meant for young people, it's for them. At the AfCFTA Secretariat, we are in the process of designing a technical support and capacity building program, specifically for small and medium enterprises, youth, and women in trade. We will mobilize AfCFTA state parties to promote cooperation among them for the purpose of increasing SME trade and investment opportunities. We will establish information sharing portals that will help SMEs, youth, and women to better understand the benefits of the AfCFTA agreement and provide other information useful for SMEs to access new markets under the AfCFTA, including their integration in the various value chains. You might have heard that last year in December, the heads of state and the government decided to have a specific protocol on women in trade, and this is going to be developed and it will become part and parcel of the AfCFTA legal architecture. We are planning to also have similar legal instruments for SMEs and youth. Of course, this will depend on the willingness of state parties, but we think it is very important to have a similar arrangement and have relevant institutional arrangement for those groups of key stakeholders in the AfCFTA process. We are going to also launch a new framework for a continuous and ongoing SME youth and women in trade dialogue, which will be region and country focused. So these are some of the key programs that the AfCFTA Secretary General has put in his priority agenda to make sure that no one is left behind when it comes to implementing the AfCFTA. This SMEs, youth and women trade in trade dialogue will enable participants to provide views and information to government officials on how the implementation of the AfCFTA can also benefit homegrown SMEs, not just big multinational corporations. As you know, there have been complaints that this AfCFTA might be swallowed by big corporation and not give chance to small entrepreneurs. So we are planning to have such a program that will involve young people. You also know that Africa has a large number of young people who are active, and they are the drivers of the digital economy and digital trade, which they facilitate through innovative new platforms that enable the digital economy and digital trade. You're also aware that about 70% of Africans are under the age of 30 years, and over half of them are females. So to ensure that youth in trade is fully involved, and in particular, make sure it can the AfCFTA can benefit them, there are a number of proposals that the AfCFTA Secretariat is putting on table, which I want to share with the audience. First of all, the Secretariat, the AfCFTA Secretariat, has to be a center of excellence for trade policy and trade law in Africa. And this means it has to attract the brightest and the best African graduates in this field. Of course, we have seen it's not all African youth who have had chance to go to school, but in this case, if we have a center of excellence, then we could be able to groom more young people in this field of international trade. Of course, modeling on other multinational institutions, we are going to create a young trade professionals cadet program, which can benefit all young Africans. It is critical in preparing young African graduates for professional positions in the AfCFTA Secretariat, or even in trade ministries at national level in their respective countries. And in order to encourage youth involvement in the activities of AfCFTA and to equitably share its benefit, the e-commerce protocol of the AfCFTA agreement must address some of the challenges of youth in digital trade, as we believe the majority of people involved in digital trade are young people. The AfCFTA Secretary General is planning to initiate a platform for youth engagement in digital trade, which will set, of course, a digital trade cooperation agenda. So we know there are many benefits for this AfCFTA market. And we know that African economies have historically been producers and exporters of commodities. And the consequence of this has been that the level of intra-African trade is very low because we export commodities to the rest of the world, but when it comes to what we consume, we have to rely on importation, and which is, of course, not balancing our trade because we are getting less than what we spend when we import finished products. So harnessing export diversification requires African countries to engage in trade among themselves through value-added product. And the complementary task that we have to do is to invest in learning how to manufacture high quality and competitively priced products on the continent, not relying on importing everything from China, from Europe, from America. For this to happen, of course, there will be need for collaboration among governments and private sector and academia in research and development to promote product design, quality infrastructure, packaging, marketing, branding, logistics as well, reliable transport and communication networks, among other levers of harnessing technological capabilities that are required to increase value addition in manufacturing and agro-processing for AfCFTA market. Of course, entrepreneurship and industrialization can play an important role in addressing Africa's socio-economic challenges. And the key drivers of job creation and engines of innovation are the small and medium enterprises. They will contribute immensely to the country's economy, along with the small and medium industries, which have the potential to utilize domestic industrial inputs and raw materials. This is what AfCFTA is aiming at promoting. Of course, beyond their economic benefits, entrepreneurship and industrialization can contribute to Africa's social development by catalyzing the development of productive capacities and fostering the creation of decent jobs, ensuring greater inclusion of women and youth in economic and social development. Africa today has no choice but to invest in the development of SMEs because of their importance in our economic development. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us importance of digitization of sectors of the economy to accelerate productivity and encouraging digital innovation, especially high quality public education in with universal access to internet. Of course, considering the growing importance of e-commerce and digital trade on the continent, we are also encouraging African startups. Digital platforms are increasingly making trade easier by promoting digital financial and social inclusion. And this can lead to significant growth in business that can be generated domestically and across the continent. It must be noted, however, that for a business to succeed outside its borders, it must first receive adequate support locally, including favorable financing options, business support services, training, and conducive environments that promote growth. We are aware that in some African countries, entrepreneurs still find it difficult to access adequate government support, as well as effective platforms on which they can co-design alongside the government. So this means that they are lacking the environment to thrive. This has led to many entrepreneurs to fail to scale their operations, and in some cases, some of them have forced to operate in the informal sector because of the lack of this conducive environment. So what needs to be done to ensure that young African entrepreneurs can reap the benefits of the AfCFTA? The AfCFTA will give entrepreneurs across the continent access to a much bigger and larger market. It's therefore important that young African entrepreneurs understand how the AfCFTA could benefit them and their ventures. As awareness is raised, I know many organizations are now creating awareness around the AfCFTA. Entrepreneurs should begin crafting new trade roadmaps for their businesses informed by the agreement. Of course, we must ensure that entrepreneurs are adequately trained in selling their products and services to the international market. We must ensure that entrepreneurs are well informed of the export procedures, including customs processes and the quality requirements. We must ensure that entrepreneurs understand financing facilities available for export businesses. And we also must ensure that entrepreneurs produce goods and services that are in demand beyond their communities, because now we are looking at a larger market of 55 countries. So those who've been producing locally should now look at the horizon of the market and start also addressing the needs of other populations beyond their communities. For the full benefits of the AfCFTA to accrue to African countries and citizens, of course, there will be numerous additional policies to be to be implemented, and measures, reforms to be put in place that are also key. For example, infrastructure, transport corridors and logistics, as well as to improve the business climate in some of the countries where it's still difficult to do business. And it is envisioned that the AfCFTA will lead to increased competition, innovation, and prosperity for Africa's people in the long run. For this AfCFTA gains, of course, to be realized, entrepreneurs and policymakers must be aligned. They must engage with each other to provide structure and clarity around how goods and services will move and around the benefits that the agreement will bring to business. And these discussions between entrepreneurs and trade ministries at their country level will also enable the review and updating of national trade policies discussions, which will benefit both the government and business communities. What is now expected as the role of innovation and technology in implementing the AfCFTA agreement? We know that technology is integral to the movement of goods and services, especially with introduction of Pan-African business-to-business and business-to-consumer platforms. We have seen a number of platforms coming up on the continent. Jumuiya, we know M-Pesa in Kenya, we know EcoCash in Zimbabwe, that are showing that Africa is truly becoming one market. And transition today, this morning I had someone posting a message that a large number of African youth are not educated, so they are engaged in small jobs like wheelbarrow pushers, of course, which is understandable. But we have to understand that we are now transitioning from muscle power, mechanical power, to where we are today with enhanced cognitive power, which is technology and digitization, which is, of course, augmenting human production. It means that what we used to experience 15 years ago is not possible today if we have to really secure jobs for our young people. And young entrepreneurs know that some tech companies seem to require little capital to prosper. We have seen many businesses that have prospered in the past, like Instagram, WhatsApp, and many others, Airbnb, Alibaba, Uber, Bolt, Amazon. All those companies start as tech companies, but they have been able to create jobs, but also bring their owners to another level of business. I think those young people who have gone to school should start reaping the benefits of technology. We also know that artificial intelligence is around the corner, which now brings me to the issue of what is adequate education that we have to give to the young people in Africa. Because you can see now with artificial intelligence, we're having self-driving cars, we have drones, we have virtual assistants and translation softwares, which are taking away what used to be the jobs for Africans. And of course, these technologies are benefiting consumer big time because the benefits for all of us who consume these services are very important when you are ordering a cab, when you are finding a flight, when you are buying a product, when you are making payments, when you are listening to the music or watching a film. You still have to rely on those new technologies. But now, how about entrepreneurs? How about people who've been working in those areas? I think that's where the challenge is, because it's not everyone who is benefiting from those technologies apart from consumers. So we think innovators and investors are the ones who are the big shareholders in those high-tech businesses, which of course requires a lot of skills. So now my advice for the next education will be to train our young people to have critical thinking capacities, to have communication skills, to have collaboration and creativity skills to adapt to the fast-moving world of technology. As I conclude, I would like to emphasize that the AfCFTA has the strategic role of facilitating the rapid recovery, structural transformation on the continent, sustainable development of Africa, and also building resilience of African economies. Many studies have shown that the AfCFTA is a net trade creating business with long-term gains, of course, and will enhance the welfare across Africa, including among the small economies. It will lift a number of Africans out of poverty. Around 100 million people will be lifted out of poverty. It will contribute to economic growth of the continent by 7%. This is very good news. And we invite African private sector, especially young entrepreneurs, to come forward and increase their investment on the continent. And by so doing, we are contributing to ending poverty by also contributing to economic growth of the continent. We need to really end Africa's dependence on aid and commodity exports. We need to use AfCFTA to diversify our exports, to accumulate our savings, and make sure that we are self-sufficient. We have enough resources on the continent. We just have to make use of them. We just have to know what is right and what can be done. And by so doing, we hope that the future generation will inherit Africa that is better than Africa we have. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I think those are a few words that I want to bring to you from the message of His Excellency Wamukele Mene, the Secretary General. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Prudence. I think you really outlined a number of mechanisms that you have put in place that will be of interest to the youth. So Mr. Prudence is the Chief Technical Advisor on the African Continental Free Trade Area and Head of Negotiations Support Unit. So thank you for delivering the remarks of the Secretary General. Please convey our appreciation for taking part in this symposium, because your initiative is one of the key initiatives of interest, especially at the moment, because the youth, there is so much optimism that there is going to be a change in the economic dynamics. So I think you indeed articulated it very well, that there are a number of initiatives, including the regional value chain, the online platforms, and the programs that you have designed for youth and women in SMEs to access and integrate into the new markets. What I like the most is that indeed we are on the same page, and you really acknowledge the reality of the situation, that raw materials, they are in abundance, and they are being exported cheaply, and the imports of finished products are being imported at a very expensive cost, and that alone cannot allow the balance of trade to be in our favor. So thank you very much for articulating the the issues that are relevant to this platform. Allow me to now introduce the next respondent in this session, who is Mr. Seth Muli. So Mr. Seth Muli is an executive director of the Youth Bridge Trust, a grant-making body that aims to create collaborative opportunities for youth on the continent. So Mr. Seth, if you are present, please take over the platform.
Thank you very much, sir, and all protocols observed. This is such a fascinating and engaging forum. Thank you to the organizers of the event and to my fellow panelists, Pearl, Palmer, and Mr. Prudence. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Prudence, you've summarized essentially what I was going to question around the Africa Free Trade Agreement as it relates to youth participation. I have the privilege of leading an organization that essentially funds young organizations that are assisting young people in setting up entrepreneurial ventures, in ensuring that they have skills building across the continent. And I think I'll allude to an event that we hosted in partnership with the Africa peer review mechanism called the African Youth Economic Forum. We hosted it in April of this year. And the main purpose of this event was truly to help articulate the aims of the African Free Trade Continental Free Trade Agreement to young people, to really bring it at a granular level. And I'm pleased to report that we will present the findings of the report to your office in Ghana in the next months to come. But I want to highlight just a couple of key themes that came out of that engagement, where we had over 1,000 young people participating from 45 different countries, as we talked around the key issues that can help drive the economic future of the continent and the Africa we want to see. And all these sessions were really driven by young leaders on the continent. We talked around issues of entrepreneurship, social investment, and how the Africa Free Trade Continental Free Trade Agreement can assist young people in really building their entrepreneurial ventures across the continent. Now, the Africa Free Trade Agreement hinges on the participation and leadership potential of this continent as a salient resource whose full potential is yet to be explored. Now, while institutional and governance structures are important to ensure youth inclusion, it is really important to take into cognizance the significant role of marginalized groups such as women and the role they can play in realizing continental-wide socio-economic aspirations. Gender equality and inclusivity is absolutely important when considering continental movements and migration patterns, which have always been dominated by women due to the disposition during times of conflict. Equally so, it is important to be mindful of the fact that the African Free Trade Agreement is not a private sector-driven initiative, and its success, which is closely tied to youth participation, is intertwined with the entrepreneurial spirit of Africa's youth population. The political developments that have taken place on the continent that saw the youth at the charge of political change in countries such as Burkina Faso, the Fees Must Fall movement here in South Africa, and the End SARS movement in Nigeria are telling of the positive impact that young people can have on the continent's political, social, and economic future. Now, if youth participation can have a positive influence on political outcomes, including in settling previously repressive regimes on a democratic path, the same can be said about the possibilities that the African continental free trade areas can unleash. The challenge, though, is that youth participation has been viewed as a favor. And it is quite clear now that this mindset has to change, as it is about time that it begins to be viewed as a right. Now, a bottom-up approach to policy making, which puts civic center, and I represent the NGO, the community-based organization on the continent. We really need to ensure that youth participation has to be a mainstay when it comes to policy making and how we implement it, as my colleague Pearl mentioned, on a granular level on the ground. Now, in saying all of these things, one of the ways that youth can affect positive and tangible change is to be embodied, to make noise in order to see continental policy interventions such as the free movement of persons protocol come into effect, and then to ensure that it gets a continental-wide endorsement. The free movement of persons protocol is important to the Africa Free Trade Agreement. In closing, I'd like to echo some of the sentiments that have been shared by my colleague Prudence. It's really important to note, and it's quite fascinating to hear that you're going to have collaborative frameworks to really ensure that young people are partaking in the Africa Free Trade Agreement. But I would like to challenge that those forums are opened up not necessarily to institutional heads such as the African Union, but to really to change makers on the ground, young people who are on the ground and participating in social change movements. So in summary, I want to applaud the work that my colleagues have alluded to, the work that is going to be put in place, but to challenge them to say that the participation of young people can no longer be a nice to have. It has to be a focal point, and we need to ensure that really young people, 15 to 35, wherever they find themselves, are at sessions of this nature, giving decision makers opportunities to hear their thoughts and hear their ideas. And this is what we created with the African Youth Economic Forum. And I hope we can collaborate further in ensuring that young people have a say at institutional symposiums of this nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seth. Indeed, I wouldn't agree with agree with you more, because indeed I share the same sentiment that you brought in the dimension that youth participation is indeed key, and the power of the youth to change the course of things must be on the side of supporting the success of this initiative. So we really need the energy of the youth on the side of progress. So I'm sure the representative of the Cfta has indeed heed the call to make sure that these platforms and programs cascade to the youth who really need it, not to heads of institutions. Thank you for that. So allow me to invite the last respondent on this session with Mr. Daniel Aduna, who is the program manager of the African Union Youth Volunteer Corps, a continental youth leadership program which works with young African professionals through volunteerism and exchange across Africa. So Mr. Daniel, if you are present, please can you take over the platform?
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Mishek, and thank you everyone for inviting me for this event. First, I'd like to start by saying Happy Africa Day to all of us. Indeed, this is the most opportune moment to be talking about this topic. Opportune also because it builds on the two other topics discussed earlier, use and peace and security, but also decolonization processes that is going on. And this topic fits in very well in it, because the key question always that emerges is that decolonize and then what? Replace the education and then what? Change the economic system and then what? Africa has never had its own clear agenda or policy so clearly elaborated in my perspective, like the Agenda 2063. And the key of it is, of course, the Continental Free Trade Area. which Mr. Prudence actually spoke so widely and so eloquently too. Now, why the CFTA from youth participation and engagement perspective is so important is that two reasons. One, it focuses primarily on the economic well-being of young people and African citizens as a whole. All the challenges that we have or we face on the continent, directly or indirectly, they are interlinked to economic prosperity of each of us as individuals, as communities, but also as nations and beyond. So whether we talk about peace and conflict, what kind of education systems do we need? What kind of economic systems do we need? Falls back eventually what economic systems, models, and opportunities we have for citizens on the ground. And I differ a little bit from the sentiment that young people are not participating. Quite on the contrary, especially when it comes to trade and the free trade area, I believe young people, in fact, are at the forefront of the implementation, because the minute I hear our women are marginalized or young people are marginalized, I just ask myself, who are the border traders in our countries? And I think many of us would agree most of these people are young people. And in many of our communities, in fact, they're even young women, mothers, and going across borders, trading and bringing around goods and services. Now, the question, however, is that how do we take now the free trade area, the continental free trade area, to be more inclusive of young people beyond what the existential limits or economic opportunities, so that the whole of continent would prosper on the back of trade. So from the youth participation perspective, in fact, I want to highlight here then two key components. One is what we call participation in itself. That means young people being at the different levels of the entire CFTA structure, which from the top level, we are talking about leadership, decision-making, policy and design, and so on. So a question is there would be paramount. How do youth voices get to those levels? How do they get ahead? And through the different mechanisms that Prudence already mentioned and the different structures that the youth division, the African Union has in place, including Office of the Youth Envoy and so on, we do have different structures. In fact, I'm even happy to say even our own office works quite closely with Mr. Prudence and his office, where we have a lot of young experts who are seconded or placed with the Secretariat's work and supporting, and that means being partly there. And then the engagement goes far as to say, are young people then benefiting? Are they participating in the trade itself? And there the response again is a lot where young people participate in the innovation, in the trade itself. Young people are on the front line there. Now the question is now, how do we turn the CFTA in such a way where we improve the enabling environment for them so they can benefit even further? Is it intellectual property rights? Is it the free movement protocols of goods, of services, of capital that would enable them even go a bit beyond? So basically the effort is around removing the obstacles and not about saying how many more young people must participate, because participation is already there. The question is now how to remove barriers further so that the benefit, young people would start to benefit more strongly and actually tangibly from the CFTA. The second aspect of youth participation for me is the youth mainstreaming. So this question is now where we start asking the question. So now that young people are in these places or in these different positions of participation or engagement, so the question is now what would they do once they are there? And that's where we talk about mostly about youth mainstreaming. So for youth mainstreaming, basically we're asking any policy that we design, any program that we design, it doesn't matter who is developing it. How do young people benefit? How do women benefit? How do marginalized communities benefit? It's that conscious effort to ensure that young people's needs are incorporated in the design of such policies. So basically it's to say it doesn't become an afterthought that, okay, once you develop, let's say, a funding scheme or a border crossing scheme, then you start saying like, oh, wait, but young people, they don't have collateral, so they cannot benefit. No, that should have been part of the design from the get-go that actually realizes what is the status quo of many young people that we have on the continent. It's the same like saying a lot of people are familiar with gender mainstreaming, women mainstreaming, where you say, if I organize an event or a trip or a workspace for both men and women, I should be cognizant that there could be parents who are breastfeeding. There could be parents that women who are having their menstrual cycles. There could be participants who cannot access certain areas. So that means from the get-go, you make the environment or the workplace conducive so it doesn't become an ask or a favor that you are including, let's say, a child-friendly environment as an afterthought for the parents or the mothers or the nurturing fathers as a response. So in the same way also, when we talk about youth mainstreaming, it's when we from the get-go now start to say, what is the actual situation like and condition for young people when it comes to access to capital, their experience, their education exposure, innovation, right to protect their innovation, and so on and so forth. And that should be part and parcel. So just wanted to add that component to the bigger discussion around the CFTA, and just to highlight once again that this is perhaps one of the most forward-looking agendas that Africa has ever put for itself, and it needs the support of each and every one of us in making sure that it reaches as many people as possible, the traders, the business people, the intellectuals, the decision makers. There are still a lot of businessmen and women on the continent who have never heard of the CFTA, that those of us who have access to the information and knowledge, that we take it to them. So it's not the role of the government alone to say, the governments have put the goodwill, they have signed the documents, they have ratified the CFTA, but now how do we get that information to the businessmen and women at the borders, on our customs units who have never heard of this and don't know how to even implement? And I think we have all of us a role to play, especially the young people who are already familiar with such protocols, that we spread that information and be part of it directly or indirectly. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Dr. Mishek, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel, for outlining very importantly how the youth can use the channels to make sure that, ensure that they participate meaningfully into these programs. So unfortunately, colleagues, I won't be able to invite you to give your parting shots as we are way beyond the scheduled time. So the law of diminishing returns might be sinking in. So I will just sum up the discussion into one key takeaway, that the youth and the small to medium enterprises should be informed, should inform themselves, and make sure that they have the information to trade and export, understand the processes, and also make sure that what they are developing or engaging themselves into is to produce goods and services that are on demand beyond their borders. Otherwise, they will not be able to benefit from the Continental initiative of free trade. And also train themselves into critical thinking. Think outside the box and be innovative so that you adapt to the changing technology. So thank you very much, our respondents, and also to our main speaker for taking part in this very important discussion. And I hope we'll keep on engaging on this topic going forward. So with that, allow me to hand back the platform to the chief moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mishek Mutize. This session was thoroughly informative and engaging. All of the speakers were outstanding. Thank you to Mr. Prudence from the AfCFTA Secretariat, who also highlighted the questions related to the rules of origin, building regional value chains, the free movement of persons protocol, and of course, youth and women's participation in implementation of this critical and timely agreement, as we heard from Daniel. Once again, strategic partnerships and synergy will be important in taking this process of implementation forward. And it is imperative for young people to participate in the development of the protocols, particularly targeting women, youth, and the SMEs, as we've heard, and the activities that are being driven from the AfCFTA Secretariat. The Mandela School itself at UCT is committed to these objectives as well and looks forward to continue creating more spaces for learning and solution building that bridges the gaps between policy and practice. We've now come to the end of our program, and we'd like to begin at the very end by apologizing for going beyond the stipulated time that had been communicated in the program. We realize more and more that these conversations need more platforms in order to take the discussions further. We echo the call to awake and to awaken ourselves to the African identity, to African solutions, and to love ourselves. We are very thankful to all of the brilliant speakers, which provided many recommendations on the way forward. Thank you to the technical teams and planning committee from the African Peer Review Mechanism, the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance, and wider family at the University of Cape Town. The discussions which focused on youth need to continue. We encourage you to continue the debates online by joining the many forums and events that our distinguished institutions will convene in the near future. We are grateful to all of the participants who dedicated time to join us in these important conversations as well. At this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Samson Itodo, the Executive Director of Yaga Africa, which many of you may be familiar with, and one of our emerging African leaders at the Mandela School at UCT, who will deliver the closing remarks. Mr. Itodo, Ms. Cynthia Mbamalu, who you heard from earlier, and their team at Yaga Africa have been instrumental in reforming Nigeria's constitution to allow young people to run for office. Their victories have been infectious, inspiring young people in East and Southern Africa to bring their constitutions to life by challenging the barriers to participation and investing in youth's capacity to lead. The hashtag not too young to run and hashtag ready to run campaigns are the mantra that says, yes, we can see the change that we want to realize through and amongst our generations. It is time to awaken as a generation that is committed to the transformation we need in our societies. Samson, my dear brother, I'm pleased to invite you now to deliver the closing remarks. From myself, Lenin, the African Peer Review Mechanism, the University of Cape Town, and the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. Asante sana, edupe, amasigenalo, inkosi kakhulu, tatenda. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Mabel, and it's been an exciting session, full of inspiration. There's a lot of diagnostics on the problems that we have as a continent, but more importantly, is to hear the solutions that have been proposed by all the speakers. I must say that being an African, I'm extremely proud of all the voices that have spoken in today's session, whether it's looking at Africa's economy and building back better, or it's looking at how we decolonize our education curriculum, but also the last session around how do we trade with one another and boost or accelerate growth on the continent of Africa. It is very clear from today's session that Africa has a huge potential, and this potential is domiciled in young people, and we need to harness this potential. I need not, belabor some of the issues and the comments that have been raised, but I just want to close us by just a phrase, and that is, if you remember only one thing in this session today, it is reject the status quo and we can do better. Reject the status quo and we can do better, given the vast resources that we have, both human, financial, and natural resources. And that is my charge to everyone who has joined this session, that let's reject the status quo and do better. Thank you, and thanks for UCT for inviting me to deliver this very brief closing remarks. Over to you, Mabel.
Thank you so much, Samson. We will now go to our closing video. Thank you everyone for joining us. Let us continue these conversations moving forward. To engage with us, please do email me, and we will forward your questions or remarks to the team. I'll pop my email address, and my counterparts and colleagues from the partner institutions will also share contact details in the chat in case you do want to reach out to us and want to partner or contribute in some way to the ongoing debates and dialogues that address the questions we raised during this meeting. Thank you.